Fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining our webinar this evening, Hamilton versus AI. This has been a hot topic in the community. It's been a hot topic around the world, and we are really thrilled to have some really fantastic panelists here to talk about it tonight. Here we have Rolly Pemberton, aka Cadence Weapon, who has been a leading voice in Hamilton on this issue over the last couple weeks, and also through a book that he's written, Ways of Listening, looking at the impact of AI on our society from an artist's lens and a musician's lens. We have Adiola Egbiemi, who is well known from her former work at Environment Hamilton and her activism for many, many causes around Hamilton, and has also been, as folks have seen, a leading voice talking about and keeping the community informed on what's been happening with these data center proposals. We have two representatives, Jesse and Montana, from No AI Agreed in Hamilton, which is a group of pissed off Hamiltonians that have come together. And we can't wait to hear from them and the community organizing side as well. So maybe without further ado, I'm going to start with my first question, and it is for Rolly, and it is to folks, maybe for folks who don't know you, could you quickly introduce yourself and maybe describe what brought you to this point as a well-known artist and now a vocal critic pushing back on AI data centers here in Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks a lot. My name is Rolly Pemberton. I'm known professionally for my music as Cadence Weapon. I'm former poet laureate of Edmonton, where I'm originally from, and I'm a Polaris Prize winning musician. And really, my entry point into being very committed to taking on these AI data centers. It started with me working on my book that came out in May called Ways of Listening. That I wrote an essay about AI, and I had done a lot of research about data centers already. So then once I learned that they were going to be building one in my community, um, I was like, let me use some of the knowledge that I already have and see what I can do to make an impact. So that was how I kind of got into it, and then I just went ham with the videos.
Fantastic. Adiola, I'm going to ask you next. I mean, you and I have been corresponding about this Slate project since before it was a data center project. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how you've arrived at this point of being kind of one of the leading voices.
Sure. Thanks, Lucia. Yeah, in my work at Environment Hamilton, in which I was a part of for 3 years, one of the things that I was able to do was be a community advisory member as a part of Slate's development, but constantly being in the room with a big question mark and not being afraid to have that big question mark still stay there. So Slate acquired Pier 16 and 17 in 2022 and began to consult for only 10% of the 800-acre land chunk in 2023, 2024. And so, of course, if you're in a room where they're talking about 10% of something and you're just like, there's 90% of this, what's happening there and where's that going to go? And even when my contract ended and I was just a person in the world thinking, where's this going to go? I was so lucky to be connected to folks who are still in and outs of urban planning and municipal halls. And so it really was in conjunction with hearing the troubles of the states. And I think something that's key is to and it's always so humbling within this work is that you're never the first person to start the wave. You are passed along and then you can pick up something and move it to where it needs to go. And so of course it was the combination of having all these people who have already spoken out and being informed already and then being informed that it was happening in your backyard that makes the combo to act.
Thanks. And I guess maybe also building on that, Montana and Jesse. I mean, one of the things that I have heard in actually one of the community advisory committee meetings that I went to after Adiola's departure from Environment Hamilton was that it was expected by the proponents there would be opposition, and that opposition was wholly based on misinformation coming from the U.S. and just sort of really framing it in the super negative light of like people are misinformed and that's why they're angry. Do you want to speak to why why residents actually join your group and why, what is the motivation? Is it because people are just misinformed or is there something else happening here?
Yeah, sure. I can jump off on that. Yeah, I have heard that multiple times that people are just getting involved because they don't know, or there's like they're building off of misinformation and like actually it's not that bad. But I guess why we kind of started this is because there was no information available to the public back in May. There was like two public articles, one in the Spectator and one in National Observer, and we found out about it. I found out about it in like a Facebook mom group. And I was like, what? What are we talking about? A data center here? And it's like legitimately down the street from my house where my 3-year old and my family live. Um, and so, yeah, I think like the first problem was that there was no public information. And it's like, okay, well, that's the first problem. And so that's why we started the account to be like, okay, if we can like start gathering information and like gathering community voices. And then there was that month of May where everyone in Hamilton became an investigative journalist to figure out what the heck was going on. And yeah, I think it just kind of built from there. I think like people have gotten involved for different reasons. Like we've heard people, it's like, yeah, I live beside the slate site, and so like I don't want to breathe this air. But then you also hear people, it's like this is actually, we know this is connected to this wider AI boom that's happening that we have no control over, and it's this vision from these AI tech oligarchs that we're just supposed to accept, and now it's in our backyard, and it's like a very tangible way to confront that. And yeah, I think that's like the power of it, is that people are joining this like for all different reasons, and yeah, creates quite a powerful force. I think we've seen. Mo, anything to add?
No, you really you got it. You covered it all.
Oh, great. And while you were talking, I literally had to second guess myself. I was like, wait a minute. I went back through my inbox and yeah, sure enough, I sent the community advisory committee meeting, which was not marked in any way to be confidential, to journalists locally in April. And that is, I can confirm it was April. So, the fact that there was even a gap in May, I don't know if it speaks to just that they thought that this wasn't going to be a big thing until it was a big thing. And now, of course, there's many, many, many stories. Why wasn't it on the radar? Why wasn't it picked up? Who knows? But certainly it's on everyone's radar now. And another thing that people are really starting to, I think, develop their vocal capabilities on are some of the processes here. And I had a question planned for Rolly on this point, which was, you were walking people through how to engage, right? Encouraging people to engage, people that had never done it before. And I was curious, like, did you already know all the municipal land planning processes and how to advocate, or was this something that you learned along the way too?
No, I was not already an expert in that field, but do have a journalistic background, author and everything, and I'm also just a huge nerd, so it was just like learning as I was going, but also just following the lead of everybody else, No AI agreed, and just seeing all the great resources they were coming up with, and just trying to like take the assist and try and score some points, So that's actually I think one of the things that was most effective about what we were all doing, and I think it's really important for advocacy where everyone has different roles, everyone has different skill sets, everyone brings different things to the table, and I think we saw what can happen when we kind of galvanize around an issue with all of our different skills.
Great. Adiola, I wanted to ask you to talk about some of the concerns specifically that people have with the projects being proposed. And, again, if I think about our history here, like you and I first started talking about this project when we were just thinking about the site remediation. At the time, it was proposed to be a logistics hub, right? They were trying to ride that COVID logistics boom in 2022, 2023. And over that time, you shared with me some of the geotechnical assessments and other, the environmental status report. And, we'd kind of flagged like, hey, some of the most contaminated sediments in Southern Ontario are in this piece of land. Like, we really want to know more about what folks are proposing there. And I think maybe even just from that first point where we were thinking about, the history and the legacy of this piece of land being the thing that we were most going to be impacted by. Now you're sort of looking at a situation where it's the future use of this land that has people really, really motivated. I don't know if you want to talk about like what is it in that future use that people are most concerned about? What are you hearing as the community concerns? And also, are there some of these legacy concerns as well around what's happening and how this process of construction proposed for that, particularly this late lands that are north of Industrial Ave to be developed?
I think that's a great question. Um, I don't want to try to encapsulate all the community concerns, although I'm sure many of us have heard a number of them in regards to environment, land, water, noise, um, just the basic ecological constraints of what's being built and what's proposed to be built. Um, so I think I'll expand to talk about what I'm concerned about, which is something that I know that we've all been feeling as we've gone through this, but as we're going through these channels, first on the municipal level, all the ways in which there are built-in incapacitations to engage. All these roadblocks of, oh, okay, wait, this can be used to be able to delegate, but now you can't. Oh, okay, this bill used to be like that, but now it's a little bit more tightened to not do XYZ. Um, that's been fascinating and at least illuminating to tap into the fact that this issue is not and cannot remain siloed from all the other issues that have, all the, I imagine most of us have been feeling prior to this popping up in regards to um, the province and degradation happening at policy levels at the province, thinking about environmental and fossil fuel harms internationally, thinking about wars and genocides across the world, like really trying to connect it all together would be my concern of falling into a silo of fighting data centers without that attentivity to how these all other shifting pieces impact and make it harder to do this work. My current worry is knowing some things at the municipal level, but realizing that a lot are going to be fought at the provincial level, and that being particular. For example, Slate now going to the OLT. Um, but I'm comforted there's a lot of resources and connections that we've made and will continue to make. And the investigative journalism is real. I had the privilege to cold DM a land use lawyer on LinkedIn just this week and sit down and be like, okay, I don't know anything about the OLT. Can you give me the one-to-one? And learning a couple of cool things that I'm happy to share here. Like number one, um, I didn't know this. There is a planning hierarchy. So for example, when we were going into City Hall, and we were talking to the Committee of Adjustment, and we were using, for example, on the severance plan, one of the things that will overturn it is the fact that it doesn't align with Hamilton's urban and rural official plan. And then fast forwarding to this conversation, learning that there's a planning hierarchy, and that plan is actually third at the bottom of the rung and going back up. The most important plan on this hierarchy would be the Ontario Planning Act, almost like the Bible of planning in Hamilton and in the province. And so now that Slate's going to the OLT, that document, in which I'm not familiar with, and we will soon to get familiar with, will be the basis of a lot of uh, discussion. And so, more things to be shared and to be discussed. But I suppose in short, my concerns are glad that we were all able to sort of quickly consolidate around the specific environmental things that were going to be an issue, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue to connect it with a big shifting political landscape, especially at a level that's a little less local.
Thanks, Adiola. Yeah, definitely want to do some information sharing as part of this call, 100%, and also plug that for follow-ups on some of the really, really technical details. Again, the Fossil Fuel Resistance Group of Hamilton 350 meets fairly regularly, and we're big nerds. We talk a lot about technical details. So please get in touch. Like, we're happy to maybe collab a little bit and work through some of those more arcane pieces of it. But we're going to touch on some big stuff tonight for sure. I know everybody, I want to hear your thoughts and reaction to what played out at Hamilton City Council between the draft at committee and the final council vote. I'm going to give everybody time to do that. But maybe before we get to that, in terms of talking about the proposals that are actually happening, talking about some of this investigative journalism, citizen response, I just want to, in the information sharing portion, just like, again, just kind of level set with people, there are three separate proposals. Two of them are related, happening in Hamilton right now. And wouldn't you know it, I was having some emails back and forth with people who are regular, like Hamilton 350, like organizing folks who, despite really being engaged on this issue, didn't really understand that nuance of the fact that there are actually three different but related proposals. So just wanted to go through those quickly before we get into talking about how things actually played out. So one of them is the 44 Frid Street, the former Hamilton Spectator building. That is the McMaster University being the main proponent, going through a private partner S2E as the actual builder developer person for that project, but McMaster University being kind of the ultimate, proponent and reason that that data center is coming forward. We have, separate to that, but also connected to McMaster University, we have the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, the DRAC, essentially, site. People will most likely call it the DRAC site. This is a kind of a consortium bid. So Slate is the, as far as we know, the primary proponent. We don't actually know if the other sublisted proponents have what percentage of say they have, is Slate 51 and they're 49 divvied between them, who knows? But we have Hamilton Community Enterprises, the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, of which McMaster is one of the many, many public universities that are a member. And they're a nonprofit group that is very interested in applying for federal funding. Federal funding is, the number keeps shifting. It keeps getting bigger every time I hear about it. At first it was $709 million and then 740 and now it's 890. It is somewhere in the order of $800 million for the Sovereign Compute Project. That is being proposed based in all the documentation that I have seen. And, obviously, if anyone has anything more recent, let me know. But everything I've seen up to this point has confirmed the location being between Burlington and Industrial Ave, an existing former Stelco building site. So this is not a new construction. It would be in an existing building, but converting the use. And that is separate, and notably, this is separate from what's being proposed north of Industrial Ave on the Pier 16, Pier 17, the piece of land that Adiola, and I had been tracking as it went through Slate's hands over a number of years and different uses were proposed. This waterfront area, the much, much bigger area, that's the proposal of some yet unknown proponents. Slate hopes to get a private proponent to build what is an order of magnitude larger data center than the other two research ones. So, their slide decks going around are pitching it as 400 megawatts. Technically, 180 megawatts is the capacity that's currently installed that Stelco had. But, they're proposing 400 megawatts in all their slide decks, and that's where that number is coming from when you see people referring to it as a 400 megawatt private data center. So these three things are all happening at the same time. And as they're all happening at the same time, and people are, trying to figure out about each one, trying to figure out lots of information, people are delegating, there is a move at council to come forward with an interim control bylaw, which would, in theory, at the time it was being proposed, apply to all of them. Then we get into a special meeting where proponents of these three projects in various forms come to speak. And then after that, we see the interim control bylaw is voted down 10-6 at council. The recap of these events has been put out. Folks might have seen the Environment Hamilton, No Way I Agreed, collab post kind of walking through the timeline of these events. But, I think that it really does muddy the waters, that lots of this happened really quickly, that lots of these things are technically separate but related. Do folks want to talk about how maybe muddied things have been intentionally or unintentionally? How the community is responding to these sites, and how community is taking council's actions. Like how is this resonating with people? And maybe I'll start with the No Way I Agreed folks. How are you feeling after all of the drama of that week, and where is your group at in terms of what comes next?
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, Did you want to go, Mo?
No, you go. I'll jump in afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, how are we feeling? That was that day, July 15th was a blow for sure. Yeah, I think the feeling that, I mean, I won't speak for everyone, but I'll speak for myself. I think, yeah, like the flip from the June 24th meeting of being a 15-1 vote, it felt like a pretty sure thing, and then it going to a 10-6 vote in the end, and us not getting a data center moratorium. I think like yeah, the so-called education session that happened on July 14th kind of really, I think, explains why. Like if you're holding a meeting to educate counselors about data centers and two-thirds of the presenters have direct financial interest in getting them built, that's not education, that's lobbying. It would be like holding a public information session on pipelines, inviting, only oil and gas companies to speak. And then I think in the meeting, hearing the counselors, the reasoning they gave for changing their votes, to me, all really like reflected the same trap, and like this, the like capitalist competitive logic that's driving the whole AI boom, that this idea that we have to move faster than everyone else and that the AI inevitably will benefit everyone, and that questioning the pace of development means falling behind, and that mindset rewards speed and scale over safety or democracy or accountability. And the risks aren't hypothetical. Like Cambridge, which is down the street, is already having to deal with a chemical spill from a data center that has a closed loop system, which I think one of our counselors was like, oh, well, these data centers are probably going to run on closed loops, so like don't worry about it. And it's really like, trust me, don't worry, we're okay, guys. Vibes. And that's, I think, like the overwhelming comments and like messages that we were getting were like, this was a betrayal of an overwhelming amount of public pressure, that was like so clearly influenced by these forces. And yeah, so it felt like a setback, but it's like, yeah, I think Adiola was saying it earlier, like it's all a part of this wave, and it's like one chapter in a much longer struggle. And it's also election year, and public decisions have political consequences, right? And so, yeah, I think it's, we learn and we keep moving forward. Mo?
Yeah. Yeah, just to add on to that, it's what we've been chatting about in our group is just in general the lack of we've seen the lack of consultation, and even the letters come through from First Nations and Indigenous folks. And we kind of had that setup of knowing, well, if they're not even really doing the bare minimum of consulting the folks that they are treaty holders with, how can we expect them to actually follow through with what they're saying they're going to do? But the way that we've looked at it, well, at least the way I frame it in my mind is, well, we've tried it your way. Um, Now let's see what's happening on the ground in the community. How do we go from there? And you probably will expect more community resistance. This is only giving us more incentive to build community, to make those connections, and kind of make sure we're all working together. So expect us. That's really it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just again, like maybe thinking about that meeting that happened, the thing that infuriated me as someone who's like a long time council land use planning watcher, as a lot of folks who have been with the Stop Sprawl movement have been, is like that was a non-legally binding slide deck session. Like this is wild to me, right? When we talk about things like urban boundary expansions, like people come with a site plan in hand. These folks do not have a site plan in hand. There is nothing legally binding, as you said, like the level of faith that folks follow through with what they propose they're going to do is, marginally better when they actually come with some legally binding proceedings. The fact that there was no site plan in hand to me was just a huge red flag. There is nothing that those folks gave to counselors, which they cannot, change when they come forward with their site plan. There's nothing binding about that whatsoever. And I'm gonna flip it to Adiola next and ask, what does that mean, right? Like it is kind of, again, it's a little bit mind-boggling to me. What does it mean when our elected officials are acting so like out of the norm? I think folks know that like that vote, some of them surprised a lot of the community members, I think. And like, does it speak to like the level of federal pressure that's happening? Does it speak to something else? Does it speak to, really trusting the slide decks that things are gonna come when they come forward, they're gonna be great. Just trust us. Like I'm confused. How are you making sense of it?
It's a good question. Um, I think, and I'm not sure how shared it is, but for me, I had the experience, and I'd see Susie O'Brien on this call. We organized together against fossil fuels at Mac, just having an experience where for 3 or 4 years we sort of went, this is urgent and crisis level and awful, and we just had um, administration say no in a multitude of various ways. No, you don't understand. No, and it's not possible. No, and XYZ. So you get a little familiar with the no, and then at least the arguments become boring, and then you go, okay, what's next? No is said, what's next? And so um, to a certain extent, the unpacking of the reasons for me becomes a quick process, and then it becomes, okay, what's next? And to me, at least the first what's next has become nurturing the activist wound of a no. So you go like, ah, that sucked. And especially any aspect in regards to capacity and shame. What's been so awesome about this campaign is that it's been so grassroots and so decentralized. And it's just been so cool to see different info sessions, different folks, different just coming together and uh, sharing and doing what they can. Um, so I suppose there is a tendency to want to go to each counselor and really get that, shake the shoulders. But I feel like that could be equally met with internally, how are we feeling? Have we cooked in the last week after the motion? How is everyone doing? How are you doing? How are we doing? And then what are we doing next? So I think in equal measure.
Thanks. Rolly, I wanted to ask, there's a perception floating around that this is a double standard, that like this AI data center is somehow different than like, people will point to the fact that a steel mill was at this site and that the steel mill was, arguably in many measures worse than the AI data center is going to be, so therefore it's fine. We were talking about this at Hamilton 350, and Don McLean, who's on the call, who most people know, had a pretty succinct answer to why he thinks this is. And he was saying that, for years and years, opposing the, flagrant environmental violations happening in Hamilton was often met with, yeah, but like also it's our jobs. Like, it's like, cool, but, I work here, so I'm not actually that upset. And like there was a lot of community resistance because the community was benefiting. I think that the thing that's different, and the thing Don was pointing out is really different, is like community members do not see themselves benefiting. Nobody's seeing this and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. This is really going to help me out. And even worse than that, a lot of people are seeing their own livelihoods directly challenged. And you've been talking about this from an artist perspective, from a musician's perspective. Like, do you think that this kind of explains why you don't see a movement grassroots in support of this, is like people are seeing through what this actually means?
Yeah, I've received that argument a few times just in some of the posting, and one of the things I say is, saying the AI data center is better than, the steel industry that was there before, the heavy industry. That's like saying it's getting stabbed is better than getting shot. Like I'm like, there's neither of them is good here. So, um, yeah, it's that's kind of framing I was trying to really connect with people, is really we don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. And the over reliance on particular industries is what has got Hamilton to where it is today. And so I'm just trying to like connect that with as many of my videos and things that I could. um I definitely feel like, though, the video I did most recently that was about connecting the mysterious black soot that is covering all of our things all the time with the future with an AI data center. It's going to be this 24/7 noise, leaking into our water supply, all these things. it's the same situation. And I think back then it was like, oh, well, we have to do whatever benefits the economy, and we have to, bring these things in because maybe they won't want to build here more. But I'm originally from Alberta, and I see what's happening to that province right now with it's just doors wide open, and they're just trying to put as many data centers as they possibly can. Meta is building one there. People all around the world, they're like, oh, Alberta's open for business. That sounds okay right now, but we look in the future and see what the result of that is in 5, 10, 15 years, so.
Yeah, well, and looking in the past, right? Alberta's #1 in the world for orphan wells, right? Just things that are just leaching into the communities. Like the Stelco lands themselves are actually a standing testament to the fact that these companies are not here to be good citizens and clean up after themselves and do all the things that maybe in the early 1900s folks thought that they would. Like I think there's an element of the conversation that we had at the latest community advisory committee meeting where Slate kind of unveiled this, where folks that were in that room were being like, Hamilton has a strong legacy of seeing the impacts from industry that's given a blank check. And like, if you don't think that people are going to connect that with what you're doing, you are mistaken. So definitely appreciate that that's the kind of framing that you've been using to kind of tell people that like, just like you see our elected representatives, especially those at the federal level, doing these announcements saying this is a perfect site because it's brownfield. And not because I'm saying a greenfield is a great solution. We shouldn't have greenfield development in so many areas, but like you're saying, right, it's that dichotomy of like, and I think your analogy is quite good, right? Like two harms, sure, one potentially greater and one potentially lesser, but two harms nonetheless. And then looping back around to the no AI greed folks. My question for you about feeling like as you're developing your advocacy, how are you guys thinking about connecting with elected representatives? Like I think there is kind of a widespread cynicism, especially looking at how things are like people just kind of following party lines, et cetera, people being mouthpieces of their level of government instead of being actually doing the reverse and representing their community back to the body they're supposed to represent us at. Like, are you guys thinking that you want to continue to engage? Are you thinking about doing other tactics? Like, I'm just, not to say that you need to spill all the beans, but like, what are you guys thinking, and how can other people think about the same struggle?
Jesse, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I can go first. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. And we have no secrets. We're building this ship as we go with everyone. Is that the same? Building a plane. Yeah. I mean, I personally, I always think of electoral politics and politicians. It's like as a community member and as like as people trying to make change in their community and however level, it's like a tool. It's one tool and one tactic in a box, and sometimes it's the the tool that you need at that moment. And these past 2 months has been very based on working with the municipal government and talking to your counselors and seeing how you can push change in that way. But like I think this at this moment is so necessary to be doing like an inside and an outside game. Like for sure on municipal, provincial, federal levels, like we need governments and from my view, we need government stepping in with regulations and accountability because this is like a giant AI tech industry that's currently going like unfettered with no guardrails, and that's obviously having devastating consequences. But I think the flip side of that is that we need, oh, I have a tooth, hi baby, but we also need like the community effort of right of like talking to each other and building those connections. And I'm going to pass it to Montana.
Yeah, that's great. Great start. I think what we're focused on that we want to start focusing on specifically is coalition building and connecting across struggles and movements, what has already been kind of highlighted from various folks here already. Building capacity and like harnessing the energy that we have around this and funneling it into different aspects of whether that be public education or like coming together for like community events to build those relationships even more. And especially making sure like where we want to head is to yes, highlight the data center stuff, but also connect it to the folks who have been doing this work for a long time. We have uh, a lot of folks who, like the Ganaganaran collective, who have been working with water for years, and doing water talks and building community gardens and producing different medicines. And that's just one indigenous like group in this wider area that is doing amazing work. And how can we connect those things? How can we highlight those things and make sure that that ground level stuff and is basically highlighted because it is all connected, right? So that's kind of where we're, making our way around.
Fantastic, thanks. I see folks starting to put some questions that are great Q&A questions in the chat. Please continue to do that. We're going to flip to Q&A very shortly. I just have one more question each for Adiola and Rolly before we switch to audience Q&A, which again you can either post in the chat or raise your hand, and then I'll go through and call on folks to ask your questions and direct them. But Adiola, I wanted to ask in terms of how people might be able to understand the fact that Slate is a developer, just like any other developer, and they're in it to make a buck. First they wanted logistics, now they want this. They're developing it not because of any real convictions on their part, just because they're looking at numbers and they're thinking this is going to make them some money. How might that be a bit of a weakness? We've seen a lot of the discussion here, like technically the province and the feds can approve this, and yet somehow community opposition is so big and scary that there's a special council meeting and like a very high pressure vote. So, how does this maybe tell us that community opposition does matter, and capital is flighty. Maybe this is actually a strength.
You've asked me a very difficult question, Lucia.
Yeah, I'm sorry, they're all hard.
Um, yeah, I don't think it's I can't think of a large disadvantage for a company within a country like Canada wanting to make money. However, there are possibilities. This reminds me of Toronto Community Benefits Network, and just thinking about large scale developments in general and what's possible. Um, of course, there is the realm in which they don't happen, which is a great possibility and a possible possibility. There's the realm, though, that they happen and they happen with particular guardrails built in. And I guess going back to the present, in which we're still working towards an interim community bylaw in our neighborhood, um, the year of pause would have allowed us to figure that out. And so now, as we're still going forward with something, just not at the timeline that we were hoping, and there's still the ability to have conversations about the second track in tandem, I think. I'm thinking particularly about the example of, for example, the new airport being built in Toronto, and the Toronto Community Benefits Network was able to get $28 million allocated in conjunction with that airport being built towards things like who was going to be paid to build it, housing around it, community and childcare services around it, being locked in together. Um, Now, of course, as we've been talking about messaging and narratives, and one of the narratives that we've been hearing from what they've been saying about us is this sort of blanket hysteria that I don't think is accurate, but I can understand where an opponent would make that assumption. Um, could be rebuffed with, we want this interim control bylaw, period, and we're going to work to get it to happen. And then once it happens, there will be a scale perhaps per chance of depending on who is building what, things that can be automatically applied in. And I think another example in Hamilton that's a good one is Metrolinx and the LRT. Not sure who wants it, not sure how it's going. However, as it's even while it's being opposed and still going forward in this weird, jerky way, there is organizations in Hamilton that are working to build in benefits that no matter how, where, what, and even especially in the chaos of it not being built yet, there can still be community benefits that come along. So at least that possibility of community benefits is a ray of hope. And I think especially because on the federal level, there seems to be no ears. On the provincial level, there seems to be active dismantling of the protections we would have. The municipal level remains the most important way, I think, for community members to stay engaged, get our voice heard, and that is the level in which community benefits work. So I see a lot of hope and a lot of possibility there that, as Mo and Jesse are mentioning, like as we build these coalitions, as we continue to figure out structures that work for our decentralized organizing, this is a tool, a possibility as well.
Very hopeful message for an election year. I'm gonna have my last of the prepared questions here for Rolly saying, where do you see your mission heading? The mission you have to change how people are engaging with not only AI but music and each other. What's next for you in that work?
Well, great question. In a couple weeks, I'm speaking on a panel in Calgary at Bump YYC, so discussing these issues more. But after the city council vote, which was so depressing, it got me thinking of what are some other ways I can approach my issues with AI. And I have been in some conversations with high-level music industry people, other artists, about putting together, at first, maybe it's a bit of an advocacy group, but in the end, ultimately, a class action lawsuit against the AI companies, against Suno and UDO, who have been illegally scraping our music. And bringing them into this lawsuit will cause them to have to go through discovery and admit that they have been stealing all of our music and our art, and hopefully we can be properly compensated for that. So that's my next big project.
Love to hear that. Yeah, it's just like one of those things where we see over and over again these double standards where technological innovation leads to throwing the rules that previously existed for a very good reason out the window, whether it's copyright, whether it's land use, you name it. So yeah, really excited to hear that you are working on that and taking the fight to the origins and the theft that created a lot of this stuff. I am opening it up now to questions. So if you want to ask your question using your own camera, your own voice, and direct it to somebody, put your hand up now. And in the meantime, while people are, summoning the courage to put their hands up, I'm going to ask a question from the chat, which came from A. Bidar, and it said, how can we understand what is happening around AI data centers alongside massive investment in military at the federal level? That's open up to anybody. Anybody want to take that? Are these two things related? I'm seeing nodding heads. Anyone of our panel answer?
Oh, you have to answer. You nodded your head.
Oh dear. Jesse, you jump in if I miss anything. But I think essentially the way that they're connected is through like the systems of oppression and the systems that we navigate. Um, I could probably go on forever about that, but Jesse.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I think that the way I think, I mean, I'm no expert here, but so I'll say that up first. But I think like when you think about Carney's priorities so far, like we are seeing like haven't seen this level of investment in military since World War II. Like that's massive. And then you also see him going like all out for AI. And I think like for me, not only do I think that and like we know that AI spending, like AI tools are now being integrated into military. Yes, my love. I did miss you, but let me just finish my thought. And so we know that AI tools are being used in militaries and like how has the public, how have communities had a say in that? We haven't so far. And the other thought, I think, like another important thing would be to say, just like, what does that mean for the priorities of how, like, at the same time that we're seeing massive investments in AI and the military, we're not seeing massive investments in healthcare and education. And so for me, when I'm thinking about it, I'm really thinking about what are the priorities that are being set out by this federal government that now has a sneaky majority, and why is like the public not being listened to, or where's the public at on that, and what is our role as community members who are engaged in like thinking about these things? What is our role in talking to other folks about that, and really questioning it? That is
I also wanted to add
Yeah, go ahead, Adiola.
a lens of analysis that I've been operating on is something that I luckily got from an undergraduate course I was able to take. My major was poli-sci, and I was taking a course in third year called Politics of a Dying Planet, and it was a really awesome course. It was broken into 6 parts, and the last half of the course was examining 3 possible future pathways that the world could go forward on. And pathway number one, the professor called barbarism. So viewing climate change through this like military lens, building fences, borders, strengthening domestic force to keep out the harms that will be happening to other places, if that were even possible. The second route being the liberal route, um, uh, adjustment, it was called. So just trying to look at climate change as this sort of like market-based issue and deal with it through the market. So things like cap and trade programs, things like yeah, just like internalizing the externalized issue of fossil fuel emissions. And the last route was this adjustment and transformation route. So transformation being the things that I can imagine most of us on this chat would want to see. Green New Deals, degrowth, cyclical economies. And at the end of the class, our final essay was like, write your final paper on which one of these things you think is going to happen in the future. And I can't remember which one I wrote, but thinking about that class now, 5 years since I took it, 5, 6 years, I was positing, and I've posited this on social media, that it's all three at the same time, which is very weird. But you can see it in the media so very evidently. Sometimes two solutions will come out of a leader's mouth at the same time. You know, you'll have Carney talk about um, investing in oil, and Borders at the same time as talking about um, this liberal sort of expansion into like, but we need sovereignty as well in this realm. And you're just like, how could this merge? And it is this almost split approach to dealing with crises, trying to do all at the same time. And so the fortunate aspect of that is that the transformative aspects of it are also happening as well. And I think that's what I think this call, for example, and the organizing that's been happening this summer is an example of the transformation of the world still going through, as well as we're seeing the other two things happen.
I'm going to synthesize a couple of the different questions here together. So there's a question from Shelley about whether or not we could use the chemical spill at the Cambridge facility to advocate. There's some questions here about information sharing between groups and all this sort of stuff. But where my mind goes when I think about that is like what has happened up till now is residents sharing based on information being shared by other people, other places, concerns about things that they think are in the realm of possibility that they're worried about and that they think that our elected officials and our planners and our city servants should be worried about. What we've talked about and something that I personally, I've been talking with various folks who are on this call about is my frustration with the lack of information, the fact that information resources, like even just from my own lens here, is like I've been sharing information resources and they're not, I don't know if it's because journalists are not understanding. I don't know if it's, what decisions are happening, but there seems to be this thing where like information alone is not going to fix it, right? Like the logical and believe me, I wish it were the case that you could just logically lay out the facts and, people would get off of fossil fuels and people would not expand into the green belt and people would do all these wonderful things. So I think that ties into the other question about like, how are communities organizing, not just locally, but across the country, across the province? Like how can we organize knowing that this isn't a fair and level fight, knowing that this is not just we come with the facts and everyone goes, oh, you're right. I was so wrong. I'm going to change my mind when there's a lot of power and a lot of money riding behind this AI boom. So anybody's thoughts on how to tactically build solidarity and actually push back in a way that might stop some projects from happening. I think people in attendance are hoping for some hope here. So any good bits, good examples to share? We're all ears.
Adiola, what do you got there?
This book that is not coming through my blur is called How to Blow Up a Pipeline by Andreas Malm. There we go.
I was just gonna say very similar. Like we can look to our folks at 1492 Back Lane. They they are literally that's the perfect example of something that's super local as well. Um, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I see folks talking about the upcoming election in the chat, people saying like, hey, like, no, we are pushing back hard on this at a time when we know these elected officials are listening and we know that we have some leverage, which is a really great point. And finding those moments where the community voice can really matter and really shake some of this feeling of inevitability. Don McLean asks, should we centrally focus on fighting billionaires? I mean, I think everyone on the call is going to say yes. Tactically, I think, one would say that maybe the AI data center fight is pushing back on billionaires. But I mean, if folks have other ideas on ways to push back, again, our audience is all ears. Shelley asks, weirdly, and I'm curious to get people's thoughts on this, some right-wing counselors voted on both sides. Do folks maybe just want to very quickly speak about what to read in or not to read into some of these votes? This municipal election is going to be a bunch of people putting together like voting histories and scorecards and stuff of how people have voted. Do you think there's some people who voted on the right side of this issue but maybe aren't actually good allies?
Yes, of course. Yes. And I think it's been interesting in a large scale of being in a politicized way of being, in which we are increasingly seeing the most crazy combinations of political ideals be present in individuals. And I think an example it would be on city council, where you can see, for example, Esther Pauls with a track record of voting against climate initiatives for police budget increases, now voting against the data center. It speaks to, again, having a holistic look at as you said, scorecards and voting history of counselors, not looking at data centers as a single issue event, but as something that operates in a context of how a counselor might look at it. And yeah, seeing just like the weirdest political ideologies ever.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I've seen all of our speakers tonight posting something to the effect of like, who is pushing for this? There's no one in my life who's like, I really love this AI build out. It's, like it, and yet very occasionally we kind of get this glimpse into like the brand of people who are enabling this, despite not being billionaires themselves, right? People who drawing on folks that I've met, a lot of people who work in finance, a lot of people who work for banks and doing financial analyst work, people who are in engineering, especially software engineering. Like there are certain subsets where all of a sudden it's like, the connection to reality has been turned on its head and like they don't seem to understand what the vast majority of other people are thinking and feeling. I mean, personally, I read into this some of the like lack of community connection, but like really, I see you've unmuted. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, well, I just feel like we what we don't know from their perspective is they're maybe more aware of the fact that this is a huge bubble and they really have to just get ahead of this. That's why there's so much speed, there's so much urgency to get these things made. It really is on flimsy ground. A lot of this technology, it's not profitable, and they're just trying to, it's the monorail all over again from The Simpsons, right? It's just trying to bring these things to communities that they think they can take advantage of, and it's just up to us to fight it everywhere we see it. And honestly, I really wanted that moratorium because we might not even be talking about AI in a year. It might, because it might go the way of NFTs and all these other things that were supposed to be the be all end all, especially for artists. They're always just like, hey, if you don't get on this now, you're going to be left behind. And do you know how many times I've heard that in over 20 years of my career? Like, it's just another thing like that.
Well, I'm curious. Okay, really, I'm going to follow up on this, which is so compare and contrast NFTs and crypto, right? So no crypto, people went and like people have bailed out various things. It's similar to like, you know, folks here, I might be dating myself as someone from the late 1900s, but like I remember being politically conscious when the '08 bailout happened, right? Like my hometown was devastated. Half the kids at my school left because their parents were fired. And yet people on Bay Street did not lose their jobs. They were all compensated. And like, do you think maybe they're operating in a bubble, but also they feel like there's no consequences? Like they're too big to fail, right? Are they
No,
too big to jail and
absolutely.
fail? Is that how they feel?
No, no, absolutely. Like they know they're just trying to like benefit as much from the situation as it's presently constructed, before the bottom falls out. I think that's a lot of people in tech, a lot of people in finance, a lot of people in fintech. They are grifters, and this is a bit of what we're seeing here with AI.
Uh, Totally. Folks here are talking about like when we're building these coalitions, can people who are conservatives, self-identify as being right wing, be part of a coalition that takes us down? Is this like, like I'm curious to get people's thoughts here. I know this comes up a lot. It's like, oh, like you can bridge the right-left divide. Not that that like linear model actually describes, people are complicated. But I think most people here definitely generally would identify as being on the left. Probably wary of working with folks that would identify as being on the right for very good reasons. Is this an issue that transcends that in a way that we have to be open to working with people we have fundamental disagreements with? Is that a good tactic, or is that just like co-opting? Like, curious to get people's thoughts here.
I think it's an important discussion, especially if folks are curious and or new to organizing. How do we build a broad base of coalition support? From my experience, and I respect that folks will have and come from different organizing traditions. Maybe I'll point to one example and then talk about where I sit right now. Um, the one example that's coming to mind, first and foremost, is how we organized, where as things were starting to pop up and people were starting to pop up and speak and group chats were being made and pages were being made this was in advance of the June 4th Committee of Adjustment meeting. I personally was, DMing people. I remember reaching out to Jesse, being like, "Hey, like, I'd love to have a call." And on the call, it's like, "Oh my God, okay." So I'm gonna be like, I organize like with anti like abolitionist principles, anti-Zionist principles, and like indigenous sovereignty principles. Bottom line, we'll see what we'll see. And it was so heartening. Where Jesse was like, "Yeah, bottom line." I was like, "Oh, okay, we're full speed ahead." Like, great. Um, and that provides a level of trust and confidence and yeah, just wholeheartedness that you're able to just continue and go forward. And it's really foundational, I find. Counterexample, I've been privileged enough to be a volunteer with the Hamilton Encampment Support Network for a couple of years. And as an organization, really um, keen on making sure to include folks who are unhoused themselves as a part of the organization as key and central voices. One example is we had a very long protest last summer in which we were sort of just sitting at City Hall and various parks around the city, just to, in light of an encampment ban in parks making it exceedingly hard for homeless folks in Hamilton to exist and pushing them into further and further dangerous areas, kind of just re-centralizing invisible spots. And the protest was a 24-hour one. We were just there all the time, just present. And what tensions we would run into would be different folks who are unhoused, whether it be due to life experience, whether it be to the realities and the changes that happen when you are unhoused, would express a whole host of different politics, many of which folks who are part of HSN and not unhoused disagreed with. And there were so many tensions in terms of like, what do we do? Like, how do we educate? But if we come with an education and this and that, and those are two realms of organizing. And if they were to ever coincide, I don't think it would be anyone's place to say how and what. And we did have issues, tensions, and things that chronically kept occurring. And there was no solution. It was just like this. HSN in general, organizing is a very tense spot, but we do have core groups of folks, and those core groups understand, and those core groups continue to speak with some folks who don't agree ideologically with us. So I at least wanted to give that example, so that folks know that some folks do organize with folks who do have different ideologies, and it's primarily in the example of HSN for that lived experience of what they're going through. So there very well could be possibilities and tensions, and it's ongoing. It's a very unsatisfactory answer, but if you would like to chat more about it in specific, I'm happy to. I'm happy to talk to HSN folks who might want to, but it does happen and exists.
Yeah, and follow up, you just reminded me in terms of reaching out. We are definitely going to be sending out like an email and putting up on our site like additional resources from all of these folks, so you can follow them, follow their work, follow what's happening. Get in touch if you're so inclined, because we're really grateful that everybody has shared some time and some perspectives with us. I'm gonna close this off. Last question from the Q&A. Question from Amanda LeBlanc asking if there's like just a little laundry list of practical steps that people can do pushing back on data centers in Hamilton, AI in general. Just like maybe if each of you wants to give like just like a thing that like people can do in their own lives, in their own worlds, in their own little sphere of influence. And maybe also if your thing is collective, make it something that they can do with you or with another group.
My first instinct would definitely be to talk to people offline. I don't know if Jesse was going to say the same thing, but algorithms online, and this was something that I'm glad we get the chance to talk to a little bit, in that, the whole we exist in a society, we fight against automated technology and AI on these platforms that propels it forward so much, like Instagram, like Meta, like Facebook. The tension exists, and one of the mediating things that I found is helpful is just those offline conversations with neighbors, with small business owners that you frequent, with friends who don't live in the city, and just seeing and gathering sort of informal understandings and perspectives. Um, it's longer term work, but I think it does serve to not only refresh your own palette of what people are saying. When you're online, you're like, yes, everyone hates data centers, yes, and then you are in the real world and you're like, fascinating perspective. It's all valuable.
Great. Well, I'm going to give our other folks just another second to think about it. Other speakers, I will be coming to you. I'll stall for time by giving my 2 cents, which is like, I do feel that everyone has their own strengths to give to organizing, and whatever that strength is, I would recommend using it to push back on this inevitability. I think the inevitability is a big piece of why we're having this discussion. If something's inevitable and something's going to be taking over the entire world, of course it's going to be valued very highly. Of course the market valuation is going to be insane because it's like, oh, well, it's inevitable. It's a surefire bet. Your return will be great. And challenging the basis of that, I think, is really important, whether it's at your work, boards you volunteer in, speaking in from my own perspectives, like those are two places where I frequently have conversations where, it's like, yeah, no, this is not inevitable. And also, frankly, not useful. I can't believe you didn't do the homework for this meeting. Call it out, name it, and shame it. The same as if they had crib notes from somewhere else. Jesse, Montana, Rolly, anything that people can do?
Well, you two stole my first video. So I would just echo both of those. I do think this will not be usually my answer, but it is election year, so I think like talk to your counselors and be like share your thoughts on what their vote was. And the other thing is like it, like the only reason that we started No Way I Agreed, like Montana and I have been friends for 15 years. The other person, we like are friends with them, and like we just started this thing. Like I don't think you can underestimate the power of just like start this thing and then see where it goes. Um,
Awesome. Montana, any follow-up? Or is it what Jesse said?
I mean, yeah, like echoing what everyone's already sentiments, but I think just really kind of driving home the point that um like the you things will feel inconvenient to you, but like showing up for community things that you might have always wanted to show up to, but maybe felt scared to or didn't have anyone to go with or whatever, like just reaching out to people and being like, hey, like I'm coming alone, or ask your friend to come with you. You might go to it tired. Show up tired. That's fine. I'm sure everyone's tired. We live in this capitalist society and we're always grinding. It's okay to show up as you are, with the knowledge that you have, or don't have. Like people, I think that's another thing that I also wanted to say is like we oftentimes the narrative gets shifted, and we end up fighting each other. And we have to remember that the reason why it was shifted is because the powers that be are trying to make us fight each other instead of them. So just constantly showing up in the spaces and making sure you're questioning like how much space am I taking up? Like, do I need to pass the mic? Is there or do I need to go with somebody else? Like what are the things that you can be doing on that personal level and then translating that to the community level?
Awesome. Raleigh, last word?
Yeah, no, I definitely echo that. I feel like just in my experience with this particular struggle and other ones in the past, that has largely been the undoing of a protest movement is when it goes away from being a collective action and it becomes about, maybe certain people wanting to take more credit or whatever, or thinking of it as like a launch pad for them to do something else or whatever. It's really, you got to stay focused on the task at hand and think of us as different parts of the same body. That's anytime, I lived in Montreal for many years, and man, can they ever protest? Can they ever get to, if you try to take anything from them, they go hard and they work together. So uh definitely I echo that. And the other thing I would say is, especially for entities like Hamilton 350, or just anyone who wants to get better at spreading information and sharing information in our contemporary time. I think it's really important to just try and learn more about working with the algorithm, Instagram, TikTok, figuring out how to couch your message in something else, or just there's a lot of things that you can learn if you do research, looking at other people's videos and such. Like I really recommend, please check out Dogwood BC. They have been so amazing at their messaging, and I would say their stuff is also kind of Mumdani influenced. It's
Yeah.
really one of the best tools that we have now. um
Yeah.
so yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Rolly, are you suggesting another webinar right now? Or you're going to do an
No,
educational
no,
webinar?
no, 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 man. It's got to be 60 seconds, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. No. That's right. 60 or less.
Hmm.
Love it.
Well, I appreciate every single person who came for a much longer than 60-second rundown of what's going on, some exploration, some different perspectives. I really appreciate every single one of the panelists, every single one of the people who came. I know everybody involved with 350 feels the same. This is not going to be the end by a long shot of the data center fight in Hamilton. It's not going to be the end of a lot of fights in Hamilton. But really happy to connect with folks, especially new faces, new people. I think we're all going to keep in touch and
Are we
see where our
wrapping up
organizing leads.
early? Are we wrapping up? Lucia, please don't tell me.
I mean, I'm gonna potentially wrap it up because I know we've got folks in the panel of speakers who are all thinking about their impending preschooler bedtimes.
Yes.
And I think those extra couple minutes before 8:30 are probably going to be helpful. But I mean, hey, if anyone has any burning things, I mean, also, yeah, the chat with questions, we almost always like export the chat and hold on to it on the 350 side, but I don't know how frequently we actually make it available to everyone. So, I mean, hey, even just live, put it in the chat, say if you have any concerns about that, throw it in there now. But otherwise, maybe we can find some way to make this chat available, even if there's some way we could anonymize it if folks feel kind of weird about their names being attached to it. But yeah, definitely a lot of great questions and a lot of like discussions happening there. Yeah, I mean, okay, maybe last thing before we close is because Spring Hamilton, you guys are such a big group. Is there any questions that have not been answered from you guys? Anything you want to pipe up and say? Now's your chance.
Trying to figure out how to unmute on their big computer screen.
Hey there, how's it going? Can you folks hear us?
Yes,
Perfect.
loud and clear.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for hosting the webinar. I'm just one member of the multitude in this room. Just something that kept bubbling up in my mind. We kept mentioning the importance of coalition building, pressure tactics were discussed, like especially with the upcoming election. I was curious and like any sort of past success stories to kind of learn from, whether it's related to AI data centers or not. What sort of examples come to mind, or if examples don't, what sort of tactics come to mind that like coalitions and community organizations like Spring, like 350, like the Hamiltonians against data center greed, what can they do to kind of make it politically toxic, untenable for politicians, for corporations to kind of go ahead when, you know, there clearly is no intent on their part to sort of like listen to the community? What kind of things come to mind?
Great.
Totally.
Great
Taking away
question.
the social license. Yeah, go Peter, go Peter.
Yeah, and personally,
I'm
sorry, I
just
just wanted to say I do appreciate the mention of How to Blow Up a Pipeline. Fantastic book.
Yes. I'm going to let other people answer, but I will go back to one of the biggest and most powerful, let's call it days of the Greenbelt, shall we call it saga, and that was getting to the Ancaster Fairgrounds and making the mayor and all the councilors and all the interested parties show up and listen to everyday people say exactly what's on their mind. And that's the pressure tactics that we need to bring forth. So I think what we'll be all doing here is building a toolkit, right? And we've heard toolkit tools in the toolkit already. Rolly's going to be potentially working on a class action suit. That's great. How can we support him and his group? We also work with First Nation Indigenous groups this year. What are their tactics right now that we can support them with? Labor groups, etc. I mean, I brought it up a couple times, but 87,000 signatures was brought up so many times on CBC and even on The Guardian in the UK, and like all this about that's why Billy Bishop was, was pushed aside. We know it was more than that, but that's a number they love to hear. So sometimes, as silly as it sounds, having 15 or 20,000 signatures from little old Hamilton might mean a lot more than we think it does. And so the very last thing is that I put it in the chat and I will make sure it comes out afterwards. But every single one of us and the hundreds and thousands of people that have been a part of this movement can all register for the first hearing date for OLT 26-000693 by emailing olt.registration@ontario.ca. I'll make sure everybody has that. And imagine if all of a sudden their inboxes, there are 500 emails. Like they just cannot ignore it. And they will have to go, what the hell is going on? Like, well, we never see this, right? So anyways, that's my 10 seconds.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Anybody else want to respond?
Go ahead, Adiola.
Oh, I was gonna say, for organizations like Spring 350, folks, etc., I feel as though there is the possibility for us to also start to create our own um, foundations and our own backups. I'm thinking about the possibility of having and starting, I'm thinking about finances, pooled funding for bail, pooled funding for childcare, pooled funding for legal observers, training people for escalatory actions, tangible things that I think we need to start doing in advance to create the structure and the hearts in all of us to be able to do things to be done. Emergency disaster preparation, um, having specific locations across the city that we know are good spaces for us to meet in an emergency. Um, yeah, and then in addition to this, I find that it becomes very difficult to fight against something for a long time. Um, fighting for McMaster to divest is like we want you to stop. And fighting to get someone to stop doing things for a really long time can be like weary on the soul. So what was so heartening was that we were able to early in the early days figure out what we were fighting for as well. So not only, for example, did we want McMaster to divest, but we also wanted them to reinvest into green renewable energy in equal amounts, the type of energy we wanted to see in the future. So I think something that could help us um, have the renewed and sustainable spirit of what we're fighting is to not only fight against data centers, but fight for something as well, for rewilding, for positive developments, etc.
Yeah, I think Rolly's working on some of that too, in the sense of like it's not just don't steal our work. It's also like art should be made by artists. That's the point of art, right? And I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but I think that's a big part of what the struggle is, equal measure fighting against things as well as for things.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna add, like, literally, Adiola, that was exactly what I was gonna say. I was gonna say centering our relationships with the land, the water, the air, more than human things, and one another is like the only way forward. Like we, like that's the only way I can see it working.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna throw it. We're in the waning minutes here now of the real hard stop, that 8:30. Man, thanks everybody. Any last minute interjections, raise your hand now. But otherwise, I'm gonna say I really, really appreciated this discussion. I look forward to more because I think we know that there's a long horizon, and so great to connect with voices we don't normally connect with across Hamilton. I really appreciate the work everybody's doing. I hope everybody has a good rest of their evening. Rest of this. Oh, Jim.
Yeah.
Jim, I see your hand up.
I just want to say that I think this is all about people in the world versus money, and there are lots of aspects of what we're talking about that converge on that idea. So I think most of us are probably favoring the world and our fellow people and fellow species on this planet. Anyway, my 2 cents.
Oh, they're a good 2 cents, Jim. Thanks. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say thanks so much again, and goodbye for real. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.